Hello again, and welcome to the second part of second episode of Cross Border Talks. We were very excited to see first followers appear after our first episode. We were also very excited to read your first impressions and get the first feedback. Thank you very much to everybody who shared his thoughts with us. So we are even more inspired to offer you an insightful information on Eastern Europe and not only, comment on international relations beyond the stereotypes. And in today's episodes, we are going to embark on a hot topic that is the future of European Union, the possible reforms of European Union, and more specifically, what is the concept of strategic autonomy of the European Union? I'm serious. Vladimir will tell you in a minute what is it all about.
Yes, strategic autonomy of the EU is a concept which has been advancing for some time, and it became more important or more challenging especially in the context of the Trump presidency of the United States, which represented certain division between traditional strong Euro-Atlantic allies from both sides of the ocean. But also it is, I guess, provoked also by a number of other reasons, because the EU has been, it's been said for many times that the EU has strong economy, but politically it's not such a strong and independent geopolitical player. And in the case, for example, with the sanctions against Iran, in which the EU just couldn't do pretty much anything to circumvent them, and or a number of other issues, it is seen that the EU needs to somehow have its infrastructure or internal balances changed. And we have invited today a knowledgeable expert who can tell us and will discuss with us more about this concept of strategic autonomy of the EU. It is Sergiu Mişcoiu from Romania.
Hello, how do you do? I'm very glad to be with you today, and looking forward to chat with you and to answer your questions, to engage into a fruitful dialogue.
Thanks for coming.
Just for everybody to know, Sergiu is one of the top Romanian experts on European affairs. He is a professor of political science at the Faculty of European Studies at Bebes Bolyai University in Cluj-Napoca. He holds a PhD in political science and in history, so he is perfectly prepared to study populism, political transitions, which are actually among his main research interests. He is also looking at the constructivist or alternative theories of nation-building processes. And so let us start from what actually is sovereign Europe, or what it could be. Mr. Mişcoiu, when French President Emmanuel Macron talks about sovereign Europe, what does he want to say precisely? And how much would the sovereign Europe would be different from this Europe that we know today? And how did this concept appear? Is this an attempt to rethink European relations with the external world? Is this only a reaction to Donald Trump's presidency, or is it a deeper geopolitical thought behind that?
Well, if we have to start backwards a little bit historically, we can see, of course, that strategic autonomy is a concept that was created back in the late 2000s, and it was first sketched in European documents by 2012-2013, and the main idea was back then to enforce as much as possible the ability of the European Union to defend itself and to project military power outside the European Union, more precisely in the neighborhood, in the close neighborhood of the European Union. Now, we have two concepts, this strategic autonomy on one hand, and then a concept that could be on one hand stronger, but in another perception weaker, which is European sovereignty. European sovereignty could mean that Europe is self-sufficient, it takes its own decisions, And of course, if we say European sovereignty, it means that Europe is the sovereign, and consequently, the nation states are, I wouldn't say the vassals of the European Union, but they are a part of common ground, a confederation that doesn't hold very much its name because it's something that the European leaders avoid to pronounce as a word. But this European sovereignty idea is closer to the idea of a European confederation, projecting power and also having a strong decision-making system that is, let's say, overwhelming in comparison with its components, meaning the nation states. So on one hand, it's stronger than strategic autonomy because it doesn't refer only to the military side or the resilience side after the pandemics, but to a wider set of tools. And it has a meaning of enforcing something not necessarily over the exterior, like strategic autonomy suggests, but also towards the interior, meaning the nation states that will be, if we are frank, and we have to be frank, subordinated to the concept of European sovereignty.
So it looks like there are at least two major currents right now in the EU. One is the traditional Atlantist current, if I may say, and the other is this tendency which is for sovereignty or autonomy. And who are the countries on the one side and who are the countries on the other side? And also, how is this tendency developing right now, given that in Trump times it might have been important to develop it, but with Biden, the relations between USA and EU seem to be getting better?
Yeah, as Malgorzata put it before, it's a French initiative. And we have to trace it again. It has something to do also with the traditional attitude of France within Europe, but also within NATO. France always wanted to differentiate itself and to be autonomous in its relations with the United States of America, under de Gaulle, under the following presidents also. And it never left this idea, which is to some extent legitimate, of having an important degree, a higher degree of autonomy within the security, international security framework. Throughout time, France tried to define in a stronger or a more a smoother way this concept in such a way that it doesn't really hurt the feelings of the Atlantists very much. And as you pointed out, President Macron used the opportunity of the Trump mandate in the United States of America to push forward this idea of autonomization of Europe in regard to NATO and to the transatlantic traditional relations. What does it mean? It means that the European Union should have, in a progressive way, the capacity of building itself such interoperational body of military assets, such as strategic kind of construction within its decision-making bodies, not only at the military level, but also at the diplomatic and political levels, in such a way that it could act not necessarily against, not necessarily even totally cut, but in a real autonomous way in regard with the United States of America. And the question is, of course, why France? Well, apart from this past that I just evoked, we do have a country which is the only country of the European Union, now with Britain being outside the European Union, with the capacity to project military power and to intervene in wide areas of the world. And if we take, for instance, Africa, of course, if it's the only European country able to intervene in an autonomous way, in a rapid way, in different theaters of operations in Africa, and other countries are really incapable to do so. And this could be replicated in other parts of the world to a lesser extent. So it's the only country having this pretension, this claim of leading, to some extent, a system of security that could be not necessarily, once again, in competition with the NATO arrangements, but let's say increasingly autonomous from the NATO arrangements.
Okay, but France is one country, and we have the European Union of 27 countries. So how are the other countries positioning with regard to this proposal?
Yeah, we do have two different views, and throughout time, France had different allies. It is now traditional already to consider that the southern flank of the European Union is closer to the French position. Italy, Spain, and to some extent Greece and other countries privileged throughout time this position of France. And in a rather opportunistic way, by case, some other countries joined the logic of France because they were able to lead some operations within this new framework that was the European security framework proposed by France and supported by other countries. On the other side, we do have Germany with a key strategic position, as we know, the economic champion of the European Union, and at the same time the country that was always preoccupied of having, on one hand, a very close, stable, direct relation with the United States of America on the military ground, and at the same time a large degree of autonomy, but in the case of Germany, as we can now follow even these days with the Nord Stream projects, a direct relation with other major players such as Russia. And of course, Germany was always preoccupied of keeping the NATO-driven security forces in Europe to do not allow too much autonomy for only European initiatives. And I remember that by the mid-2010s, in different meetings of the European Union, German representatives always insisted that this concept should really not be so important, should really not be even put on the table in order to not alienate too much the Americans from the European defense system. And to this position, we have also to add the position of several countries of Central and Eastern Europe, most notably Poland and Romania, very pro-Atlanticist, very much dependent on the security frameworks created by the United States of America, not really willing to go too far on this European construction of a strategic autonomy for, let's say, ideological, geopolitical reasons, and also for different reasons that are related to the power networks. I mean that we have a generation of leaders in these countries that are very much educated in, let's say, in the idea that the only force capable to defend Europe are the United States of America. The main danger comes from Russia, and in this framework, only NATO can really protect Eastern Europe, and not only NATO as a nebulous organization, but a NATO led by the United States with the support of other countries, smaller countries, and there is room for the Central and Eastern European countries, given their strategic position down there. So with small variations, we do have these two opposite versions of the issue of European strategic autonomy, and these continue to be today in debate, even if today we've got a commission, ironically led by a German, Mrs. von der Leyen, where the pro-strategic autonomy of the EU major leaders, such as Josep Borrell from Spain or Thierry Breton from France, are there and are very vocal. And so, ironically, now we have a German-led European Commission with a real discussion for the first time about the opportunity of strengthening the strategic autonomy of the EU.
I think Malgorzata will be curious about something for the external relations of the EU under this concept, if it is applied in full. But before that, let me just add here that the European Commission has been contemplating on a strategic document about so-called open strategic autonomy, and it should have been published in July, but it seems that it is getting delayed, and maybe it will appear in the autumn. And I guess that might be one sign that how can I say, the balances are always in a shift.
Yeah.
And I pass the baton to Malgorzata here.
Thank you, Vladimir. And before I do ask for external relations of the European Union, I must ask one question concerning my country, that is Poland, that was rightly mentioned as one of the most Euro-Atlanticist countries in Europe. And I really have nothing more to add to what you said about the generation of leaders. Yes, Polish leaders do believe that NATO is our only guarantee of security, that we must accept even more NATO forces in Polish territory, because this is our only way to be secure from aggression from the east. At the same time, the Polish government is worsening our relations with Brussels, and there are even concerns in Poland on the Polish opposition that we may be excluded from the European Union or continues breaking the rules of the community. Is it possible that on one hand, Europe will go towards bigger sovereignty, and on the other hand, such countries as Poland excluded from the community?
Well, it would be a catastrophic scenario, and I'm very sure that the delays Vladimir told us about in pushing forward some policy strategic documents that are vital for a wider concept of strategic autonomy. These delays are due to the fact that people in Brussels do realize that if the national feelings of the Poles, the Hungarians, but also of other Central and European leaders are hurt, then it will be increasingly difficult to promote the concept and to keep Europe all together to put it in a nutshell. So this distancing of the Polish, the Hungarian, but also the Slovenian now leaders, to some extent also the Austrian leaders from the hardcore of the European Union is due to the fact that, of course, there is a matter of ideology and the views about what human rights are, what are the principles of organization of a democratic state, are different and are increasingly different. They clashed only now, but there was an accumulation throughout time of these differences, and we have to admit it. And they coincide in a quite tricky way with this view according to which we need power politics to defend ourselves. and the only capable power in the Western world to promote power politics is the United States of America. The other organizations and the other alliances or the other countries, including the European Union, are simply too weak to promote such a power politic. The attitude of Russia under Putin, of course, strengthened this impression of the Eastern leaders that there is no other shelter but the US-led shelter there. And more we advanced, more these signs of a need of strong action coming from a classical kind of power were there. And that's why, and I will stop immediately to allow you to ask other questions. That's why we do have within the European Commission, but also within the strategic documents of the European Union, an increasing preoccupation towards acquiring elements of hard power. Really, the European Union was considered to be too soft, and now it needed to become stronger, to act in a stronger way. And if you allow me, I will quote the German president Frank-Walter Steinmeier, who said the European Union is a herbivorous form of geopolitical organization in a carnivorous world. This says everything about soft versus hard power in the view of the new leaders of the European Union, and so we can expect this debate to go onwards.
Okay, and now let us stop for a moment on external relations of the European Union, supposedly after it actually strengthens its autonomy, and if this conception of making Europe more sovereign actually gets some form. Recently, Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron insisted on meeting with Vladimir Putin, and the Chancellor of Germany said that if there are problems with Russia, then in her opinion the best way to solve them is talks. And Poland and Baltic states were categorically against any meeting, and so finally it did not take place. But I am wondering if the European Union's policy towards Russia will not change anyway, if the concept of strategic Europe is being put into place. And also on this occasion, I wanted to ask about yet another direction of external relations of Europe, that ones with Africa and the whole question of migration. You said that the south flank of Europe is supporting French projects, so I can imagine they would like a more active European Union policy on its borders. So, what can we expect?
Well, from the relation with Russia, from this point of view, the situation is very complex, because we've got national policies in most countries in relation with Russia. We said that we've got very Atlantist states in the Baltic states, Poland, Romania, and others. We do have countries working a little bit à la carte and trying to negotiate directly, such as Germany. We do have Hungary, and from this point of view, it's very different from the case of Poland, because Hungary is now some sort of a semi-ally of Russia because of mainly of ideological issues, but not only. And Russia finds a very fertile land in the neoconservatist politics of Hungary. And then we've got states that are really doubting about the capacity of the European Union itself to be very firm in the relations with Russia. And of course, Russia has always speculated this. It does it now more than before, but it always tried to speculate this uncertainties and this reluctance towards a union of the EU in order to fragilize the unity of the European Union and to play in a legitimate way from its point of view its card on the European table. So I believe that of course if this concept of strategic autonomy will increase, then we will still have a debate if this concept is applicable mainly in the relations between the United States and NATO on one hand and the EU on the other, or it's applicable also in the case of a unitary Europe against an imperialist or a neo-imperialist Russia. And things are really not clear from this point of view. With regard to Africa, I just ended an interesting research with lots of interviews with African officials on their precisely on this topic, the impression that they have about the new strategy of the European Union. Will this affect the image of the European Union? Is Europe now a soft power? Is a Gentile friend trying to cope, to work directly with the African leaders in a win-win kind of framework, a much more, let's say, softer power, really preoccupied by development and less preoccupied by enforcing rules as before. And the results are quite complex to interpret it. It means that we've got an opening of the African leaders towards the new Europe, and at the same time we've got a demand for a stronger Europe. Those guys there believe that we've got big powers such as China, US, Brazil even, and of course the United States of America. And then we've got a mosaic of European powers with different interests. If the European Union will be able to promote this new image in a successful way, a softer power in partnership with the African states, then there is a wide room to penetrate on a fast-growing market, on a fastly developing set of countries from the demographic point of view, and a land with lots of threats, but also with huge opportunities in terms of investments and in terms of the future of the world, in terms of resources, in terms of betting on something that will in the future grow. And this is quite popular among the new leaders of the European Commission, I mean the new Commission of Ursula von der Leyen, to believe that Europe has to invest and has to be pragmatic in this new relation. So I'm more optimistic about what could be done in Africa than what could be the position of the EU in relation with the closer and the most ferocious Russia.
Okay, and finally, we ask you to make some kind of prognosis about what will be following in the near future. Obviously, the two currents, the Atlantists and the autonomists, will continue to coexist. But what can we expect from their balances? And finally, also, what does the affirmation of the autonomist current mean for the internal balances in the EU, for its reforms? What will change in the EU in other regards, such as social or economic, if this concept gets stronger?
Finally, there is a debate between the Atlantists and the autonomists to some extent, but this debate has to be nuanced. For instance, in 2017, the European Union created permanent structured cooperation, PESCO, mechanism within the European Union. Of course, Germany at the beginning was a little bit reluctant, but since 2019, it has cooperated with France on different operational grounds, and it was a success. This PESCO was led by the Netherlands, so a country that is close to also the United States, but has its own, let's say, claims to lead something within the European Union. And to some extent, PESCO, even if it's not really 100% a success, it's a mechanism that it... On the other hand, we've got within NATO the framework nations concept, another initiative, this time coming from inside NATO, meant to, let's say, or make more relative this cleavage within the EU between the Atlantists and the autonomists. Within this FNC, Framework Nations concept, there have been some advancements in co-working, in interoperability between the forces of NATO and the forces of the European Union, with Germany being happy, and this is something that has to be noticed, because if Germany is happy, things go on within the European Union on the military ground, and not only on the military ground. So it means that we have maybe in the end to de-dramatize a little bit this clash between the two views over the European security, and to witness the fact that, to acknowledge the fact that there are series of constructions of interinstitutional experiments, and some of them are really working. So, I mean, when we have this big picture of the clash of titans, we lose the nuanced, more refined sub-image of what happens on the ground. And on the ground, there are cases of successful interoperational frameworks that in the end will push maybe forward the cooperation, and will reduce this need for a single, well-stated, undoubtful autonomy of the EU from NATO. I think from the simple, because of the simple fact that lots of Europeans do believe that it is not really feasible, that in the end there should be a continuous cooperation and dialogue between NATO and the EU. Otherwise, the security of Europe will be endangered. I don't say that this is necessarily my point of view, but I think that this view is quite majority in the European Union. And that's why I think that smaller experiments, like in the beginnings of the European construction with the coal and steel communities, if you recall, this kind of small kind of experiments will lead necessarily to a more flexible and more operational institutions and practices. And of course, in the end, I have to stress the only way to test all these is to see them at work. So if there will be an intervention, if there will be a need for working and applying these, let's say, trainings that these troops have, and this entire concept of security has in practice, and if it will work, things will advance much faster than they are now. So I'm not that pessimistic about the future of this cooperation between NATO structures and EU structures within the European security framework.
Okay, Sergiu, thank you for your coming to our program, and thanks to our listeners and viewers for watching.
Thank you very much for your invitation. I'll be glad to return.
We remind you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we are open to your comments, remarks, questions, and suggestions for future episodes. And I also would like to thank Sergiu for being with us, for saying things that they are not easily heard in mainstream media who simplify things. So once again, thank you very much, and see you again.